Okay, so I think I am recording now. All right, so I am going to, hold on, I just want to make sure I'm recording. All right, so I am going to be introducing you to activity I do in my Introduction to Education course, Introduction to Technology and Learning course, which is where I have to make explicit the idea that we are doing research. This is what it's going to look like, and to get students engaged. And I came to use this strategy when I knew that part of the gen ed requirements was to do a research project and get students engaged, but they weren't really getting it. So I wanted to make my expectations explicit for students. So here's the way I introduce this activity to my students. So the first thing I do with my students is I talk to them about research as learning, and research is something they do every day. And I try to tie that to the fact that their university instructors are trying to engage them in inquiry, problem solving, and research, and that the skills the instructors are trying to get them to develop these skills over time, and that these skills are the same as they would use when they were doing common activities. So you need to take a look at how you might buy a car or how you might find an apartment. And those things are research, but they fall under the commonly known area. It's still research, it's still problem solving. But most people know how to do it. It's just that it might be new to a young person as they start out. So I talked to them a little bit about the continuum from commonly known to commonly unknown. So that's a bit of introduction. And then what I do is I do this. I talk to them about an activity that we're going to do to have them look at the research process. So I break them into groups of 3 to 4, and I see that we have 1, 2, 3. We have 4 of you here, and so we're gonna. So I'm gonna just leave you in this group, and what I want you to do is I want you to take about 10 minutes, and you'll be talking to each other, and you can use your phones, your computers. You're going to spend about 15 minutes on this assignment, and then I'm going to bring you back into a larger group. But what I would like you to do is this activity, which is to plan a hike. So, surprise, your family is coming this weekend, and it's up to you to plan a day of hiking. It needs to be a minimum of 4 hours in length, not including travel time. It needs to be suitable for the physical condition of your family. It includes appropriate safety precautions. It includes plans for coping with weather conditions, and at least 1 meal should be consumed on the trail. So I'm going to be quiet for about 10 minutes while you folks plan this hike. And just a moment here, let me see. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn this into a whiteboard, and you folks can use this space to plan your hike as you see fit. So are there questions before I turn this screen into a whiteboard that you can draw on? All right, so hang on, I'll get the whiteboard up and you folks can start talking with each other. Why don't you folks start the conversation and I'll work on finding the whiteboard here.
Okay, whose family wants to go? We might as well make this something that's going to work, and I can't get to Wisconsin.
Other folks? Who else did everybody leave?
No, they're there. They're just waiting for someone else to talk.
Yeah, I mean, my family can't get to Wisconsin either, so I'm trying to figure out. I mean, or maybe all of us are taking all of our families over there, and we'll have a big group going on the trail.
Okay, Kristen? We can't hear you.
All righty, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think who is in the family, in this hypothetical family, is important. I have a brother-in-law who works for the Forest Service, so for him, a 4-hour hike would be nothing. Yep, for me, that would be a bit of a stretch, and the topography, if it's going to be mostly flat or lots of hills in North Dakota, it's pretty darn flat. Might be different in Wisconsin, so we can brainstorm.
Why don't we all go?
Okay.
And Steve is listening because he doesn't have a mic. So my family who's going to go on this trip will include me, my 70-year-old husband, we're both fit, our 2 grandchildren and their parents. So put in 2 30-somethings, a 5-year-old, and a 3-month-old.
Okay, you folks should be able, can you see the whiteboard now?
Yeah,
I see it.
Who wants to be the recorder and start to write?
I don't think I should because I have to leave pretty soon, so I'm gonna.
I'll start to write. Okay, can you repeat who's coming?
2 old people
Who are fit.
who are fit. 2 young parents with their 2 children, ages 5 and 3 months.
5 and 3 months?
Yep.
All
Dustin,
right.
your family?
So it'd be my wife and I, and then we've got 3 children that are 7, 5, and 2. Yeah, so that 2-year-old really puts some constraints on what kind of trails we can go on.
All right. So you have some constraints, you're saying. So constraints.
I want Kristen's brother-in-law.
No, you don't. We call it death marches when he takes us on a hike.
But he knows what he's doing.
That's true.
So the constraints include an easy trail.
Right.
It would include lots of stopping places, right?
Yeah.
Where we can enjoy the view and let those kids take a rest and get a snack.
Okay.
Maybe interesting places to keep children's interest.
And safe places.
All
I
right.
don't know how Wisconsin trails are, but there are quite a few Pennsylvania trails that you wouldn't take a 2-year-old.
Okay. Give me a second. I need to post a link for you guys. I got to go get it here. Can you still see the whiteboard?
Mm-hmm.
We can.
Okay, good. Give me just a minute.
Thanks, Steve, for that input about the trails.
Yeah.
Did somebody find a link to the Wisconsin trails?
Well, Steve knows about them, and he's on chat because he can't talk on the phone,
Okay.
on the microphone right now.
All right. So I'm going to try and send you folks a link here in the chat room. Got to make sure I don't log you folks out and click the wrong button here. All right. Jesse, are you there? If you're there, you're sounding really weird. Jesse, you sound like a mosquito.
She said, I don't know.
Poor Jesse. All right.
You know, in situations like that, I've noticed phoning in works.
Oh.
You know, I would do that, Jesse. You know, use the phone.
Okay, there's a link on the bottom of the screen to the Travel Wisconsin things to do. Hey, Jesse. You sound like a chipmunk. mute your microphone and call in. We can't understand the thing you're saying. Okay, so for those of you, are you still able to see the whiteboard?
Yes.
On the bottom is a link, so there is a link to some trails if you want to go find some trails. You can also just type in Travel Wisconsin hiking trails.
Well, while we're picking a place, we pretty well know what we need to bring, don't we? Dustin, you know what you need to bring with those 3 kids. So we could start that list while somebody else is figuring out where we're going to go.
Sure. I mean, we need lots of water.
So we could start that list while somebody else is figuring out where we're going to go.
Sure.
Join the meeting.
Well, we've got water.
Okay.
Changes of clothes, layers.
Yep.
What kind of clothes?
Well, we definitely would want to check out the weather report. I was noticing you can, you know, obviously get that on the internet. So depending on how warm it'll be.
Okay, so what's the weather going to be like?
Are we talking this weekend?
Yep.
Okay, Google, what's the weather in Wisconsin this weekend?
This weekend's forecast for Madison is 51 degrees and partly cloudy.
We're going to Madison.
Okay.
51 degrees and partly cloudy.
Ugh.
Yeah,
So we need something for in case it rains on us. So for the children, that's going to be rain jackets and some waterproof shoes. They'll get chilled if they get wet at 51 degrees.
Yeah. And something that they can probably take off if they get too warm. So the jackets works really well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably ponchos for the adults, but maybe
Yeah.
not.
I'll take a poncho.
Okay. What else?
Food.
What kind of food?
Well, we need snacks for the kids. My granddaughter likes crackers and cheese and nuts and fruit.
Who else wants to chime in here?
Well, we need some sort of lunch on the trail as well, especially
All right.
a 4-hour hike.
So,
Given
okay, so what kind of lunch?
Easiest thing I can think of is just sandwiches.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
sandwiches for a trail.
What kind of sandwiches?
Peanut butter and jelly,
All right.
ham and cheese. And for me, that's enough. I don't want it too complicated.
Yeah, we'll probably end up eating some of the crackers and cheese and nuts and fruit as well.
Yep.
Okay. What's on the ham and cheese? Just ham and cheese? Butter, mayonnaise?
Probably just ham and cheese.
Okay.
And we've got those little packets for the people who can't eat it without something, but something that doesn't spoil, because even if it's 51, it could get warm in the backpack.
All right. All right. So I think we're going to stop there. So if we take a look, you've just planned a hike, okay? And as we take a look at this then, did anybody find a trail to go on?
Did anybody find what?
A trail.
Oh,
We're taking one close to Madison because that's where we know the weather. And I asked Steve, but I think we lost him after a bit.
Ah,
So
okay.
he's told us about the trails and that they're woodsy and how steep they are, but and there are bridges and things like that. But he didn't suggest a specific trail.
Okay, so he found a trail near Madison, and there's plenty to choose from. Where did he find this?
He didn't find it. He said, sorry, didn't see it till now, but we asked him to.
Ah, okay. All right. So does anybody know how he knew there was trails near Madison?
He's been there.
Ah, okay. All right. All right. Great. So now we have what we need. All right. So as we take a look at this, I kind of walk you through what I do with my students, but instead of me recording, I would have them take a look at this hike. I'd break them into groups of 3 or 4. And what I would do is I would have them plan the hike, and then I would have them share out. Hey, Jesse, is your microphone on? Can you mute it? Because all we're hearing is squeaking from you. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So as we take a look at this, what I have my students do is I say, okay, here is what you had, and I start asking questions much like I asked you. So what do you want to bring? What kind of food? They tell me about their hike. And this is where I get to probe, much like I did with you. So as we then share out the hike, I ask them questions like, how did you know what clothes to bring? And you folks told me shoes and jackets, and you checked the weather. Some of my students say, I ask them what day they're going, Saturday or Sunday. I just did this exercise in class 2 days ago, and they told me they were going to go on Saturday because Sunday was a day of rest. and that's it. Other folks check weather. Saturday is supposed to be nice and Sunday is supposed to rain. So I have folks who are making decisions based on what day they want to rest, and I have others making decisions based on a weather forecast. So then we get into things like, is the weather forecast reliable? So we start then talking about, do you believe the weather forecast? And that's where I start to tie into the information literacy framework. So as we take a look at that, we can take a look at what they'll accept as expertise. So we start taking a look then at expertise, and we can pick a number of areas where we can look at expertise. So the idea, for example, about what food you're going to bring, you mentioned that you were going to bring, if you were going to bring mayonnaise or mustard or ketchup or any condiments, you'd bring them in packets because otherwise the food might spoil or the mayonnaise might spoil and you could get sick. So my question to you folks is, where did you learn that from?
Learned it from experience.
So did you get sick eating mayonnaise?
Yeah, if you've ever been on the trail before, you have to take non-perishable food items.
Yeah, how do you know that?
Based upon experience of being on the trail.
Okay, so my question is, did you learn it from, did you eat something and get sick? Did you learn it from a parent? Did you learn it from some sort of hiking class? Where did you learn that from?
I just kind of thinking it through, actually, because if you've ever been in the outdoors, you realize that you have limitations with regards to the type of food that you can bring with you. It has to be low volume. It has to be high energy content. And many of the times you have to be able to prepare without any type of heat.
All right. And so did you learn this from experience? Did you read about it? Before you ever went hiking the first time, how did you know what to bring?
Just through being on the trail and actually learning by doing,
Okay.
and finding out from making mistakes.
All right. So you learn through experience. So one of the things I try to get my students to recognize is that expertise can come from many different sources. Expertise can be you and your personal experience. Expertise might come from you reading online about what kinds of foods you can and cannot bring. Expertise may come from parents and family experience with parents, and you learn from parents. So the idea about experts and where you go to consult an expert is going to vary related to what context that you are in. So there's one item, or one thing I usually bring up. The other thing I talk to them about are things like weather. So some people don't consult the weather at all, so they're making uninformed decisions. Other folks will go to a weather site and say, here's what the weather is going to be. And then we have a discussion about whether or not they believe the weather forecast. How often is the weather forecast right? Is that the best place to go for information, or should you go someplace else to get a forecast? We also talk, so what I'm starting to do is I'm starting to bring in ideas from the information literacy framework and using that to guide the discussions. And so this provides a way for me to explore many of those different aspects of the information literacy. Where do you find information? What do you believe? How reliable is it? Are you going to trust it? And things that we will use in the future. So are there questions about that process at all? All right, so if there are not questions about that, let me go back to our PowerPoint here. Oops. I don't think you folks are seeing my presentation, are you?
Not right now.
Hang on. It's supposed to be. Hold on a minute, please. Sorry. Got too many windows up. Jesse, can you post the link to the Padlet? Jesse, can you hear me? And the Padlet, so there's a Padlet link that we should have. And is it in the chat? Okay, so go down. Are you folks back in the meeting space at this point in time? I hope.
We see you.
Okay, good. All right, so can you please go down to the chat, and Jesse's posted a link to a Padlet. And Jesse, are you able to take over my screen and go to the Padlet? There we go. All right, so as we take a look at this then, what I now do with my students is I say, okay, that experience that we just did with the hike isn't really about the hike. I don't really care where you're going on the hike, but what I do care is that you can understand and see how in just 20 minutes you can go through the whole research process. So by this time I will have handed out the problem-solving pentagon that John Willison and his colleagues developed. And so as you can see here, there's embark and clarify, find and generate, evaluate and reflect, organize and manage, analyze, synthesize, communicate, and apply. So now what I ask them to do, and what I'm going to ask you folks to do, is discuss this. So as we started this Hiking Wisconsin trip, we're going to start in the center. We embarked and clarified. How did we do that? How did you know where to start or what the activity was?
You told us.
I did, okay? So as you take a look at embark and clarify, it was very structured. You folks you had very little choice. Here's the task you're going to do. So as we take a look at that, embark and clarify, it was assigned to you, all right? So with the constraints, you needed hours, you needed to find a trail, etc. All right? So now what I want you to do is take a look at the process that you folks just got done doing and see if you can find any alignment between what you did as you climbed the hike and these facets of research. So I'm going to have you folks discuss that for about 5 minutes. So Steve, do you have any ideas?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question. What was the question again? I apologize.
No, that's fine. So we, were you logged in when we did the Hiking Wisconsin thing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so take a look at this. You went through talking with your peers about planning this hike. So as we take a look at the facets of research that are in front of you, and you think about how you did the planning, can you think about ways that you found and generated information? for example, or how you evaluated and reflected?
I have to admit, I'm sorry. I must have got fuzzy. I still didn't really understand what the question is.
Well, let's walk through a couple more examples then. So as you plan the hike, how did you folks communicate with each other? And don't overthink this. This is not a trick question.
I missed the first part of the activity, but I came in at the end and saw the list that had been generated. So I assumed that people talked a little bit about their own experiences and what was needed for a hike.
Okay, and where did you see the list at?
That was the list that was on your screen, Sylvia, when I logged in. And I apologize for missing the first one. I had an equipment emergency.
Nope, that's fine. So if we go to the communicate and apply area, you folks were talking to each other or using a whiteboard in Zoom to get to talk as you made your list. You were communicating or posting ideas on the Zoom whiteboard, right? What else were you doing?
We were verbally communicating as well.
Okay, good. You were verbally communicating. So we have, did any of you send any kind of chat messages to each other?
Just chat. We chatted with Steve.
Okay, so chat messages. So you were communicating and applying. So let's go take a look at finding and generating. So what did you need to bring on the hike? Where did you figure out what you needed to bring on the hike? Some of it was your own experience. How did you know what day you were going to go or what the weather was going to be like?
Well, one of the first things we did was we asked each other who was going to be there. So that's a form of gathering data, I think.
Yep. So good. So right. So now you're catching on. So who's coming? You need to know who's coming before you can start. So great.
And we described the attributes of those people that we thought were important.
Okay, good. So you're describing the attributes. Excellent. Okay. So then what happened?
Then you ask us some questions to clarify.
Okay, I asked you some clarifying questions. Okay, so that got you thinking. So I'm asking you questions that can be embark and clarify. How about the organize and manage? How did we organize and manage our information?
Not very well.
Okay, why?
Because normally we probably would spend a lot more time and have time to look at the information and evaluate it before we made decisions based on it.
Okay, but we aren't talking about making decisions yet. We're just talking about organizing it. How was it actually, or just the information itself, how was it organized? Where was it?
You put it on the whiteboard.
I put it on the whiteboard. Did I have titles or group by any kind of labels or anything?
You did.
I did. Okay. Did any of you jot down any ideas at your place where in front of you? Like, were you taking notes during this activity? I don't know if you were or won't. It's not important.
I was mostly relying on the notes that were, common to the whole group.
Okay, good. All right, so we can leave it at you organized and managed, and we did it on the whiteboard here in Zoom. All right. So then, analyze and synthesize. How did you folks decide where you were going to go?
Oh well, what I did was when I went onto alltrails.com.
Yep.
And I typed in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yep.
And then I saw a series of trails, and I looked for trails that were that identified as easy, and then from there identified if they were kid friendly.
Okay. And why did you do that?
Because we had defined our requirements up front.
Okay.
who was going and what their limitations and constraints were. And so I took those into consideration when I identified and selected the trail.
Okay, good. So as you take a look at this, you and that particular item can fall under multiple categories. So you use that to find and generate, but you also took multiple ideas. The age of the participants, the type of trail, the length of the height, and so you're taking multiple aspects of the problem and you're putting them together to make a decision. So you're analyzing and synthesizing the trail. You're using that information to decide what trail you're going to go on. Okay. So then, as we go to the weather report, Sandra, you asked Google to give you a weather report for Wisconsin.
I did.
So, and you took that information to be great information, and this is where we're going to go, Madison, because this is what the weather report is like. So,
yeah, but we didn't necessarily trust it. That's why we're bringing rain clothes. It didn't say it was going to rain.
Right. So you have a backup plan. But you also took a look at when you spoke and said, "Find me the weather report in Wisconsin." Did you say Madison or just Wisconsin?
I did not say Madison, so it gave me Madison, and so I directed that information so Steve could look around Madison for good places to hike.
Okay, so what we're doing right now is we're evaluating and reflecting on the whole process. So this process is evaluating and reflecting. But also, as you start to make decisions, you might do it consciously or subconsciously, but the fact that you just turn to Google to find the weather means that at some level you trust that report, or at least as a starting place.
I trust the general temperature frame.
Okay, so basically what I do with my students is walk them through this activity much like I did with you. It's a bit easier to do it in person, but you get the idea. And the idea is that you can start to address the research process. Here, we're going to do a research process. This is what it looks like in 50 minutes. So research can be very simple and very direct, and research can be very entailed and in-depth, but you do it all the time. So I try to kind of get them to take a deep breath and relax, that we're going to do a research project, but you do it every day. So every time you solve a problem, it's something you do. So are there questions about that process? All right, so hang on a minute. I've got to come back and find my slides here. I've got too many windows open. All right. Share. So I am okay. So I want to make sure that we then take a look at this. So that if we take a look at this activity, a question that I have, these are all pretty much the same question. If we take a look at this, the activity is designed to help. I like to look at it as making thinking visible. So it gets me to understand how the students are thinking. And I've come to find out that it gives me an opportunity to explain to students as well. So as you take a look at this, can you folks start to discuss how this activity allows the instructor to see gaps between what I'm saying and what the students are understanding? We can even use our interactions as an example.
Well, when you sit there with a sheet that we're supposed to be filling in and we don't know what to put on it, so nobody's doing anything, that seems to be a very prominent, like, you've asked us to do something and we don't understand what it is.
Right. So good. So right away, great. There's this long silence. I can see that there's not a lot of understanding. Okay. How else? How familiar are you folks with the RSD pentagon?
I guess I feel that there might be some consideration too between maybe we're putting things up there, but we're putting them in the wrong place.
Good. All right. So this actually provides a really good discussion tool. Like, what do you think might have been in the wrong place?
It's hard for us to answer that because they were being moved around as we discussed it, so we didn't see where they ended up.
Hey, Jesse, can you bring the pentagon back up?
Yeah, and it looks different on my screen, like they're all off to the side. They're not in the middle on the pentagon anymore.
Okay.
So anyway, we couldn't tell because it was not exactly where, but it's a good thing that if we had had time to look at it, then we could probably make those kind of discussions. And if it was students, they disagree on which things were in the right places and the wrong places.
Good. And then the question is, are they really in the right or wrong places? Or, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Are they really in the right or wrong places, or does that provide a discussion that allows you to discuss the messiness of what research looks like? Like, things can fall into more than one category. And depending on which stage of the process you're in, items might fall under communication, items could fall into organizing. So there's sometimes when things fall into multiple categories. Okay, good. So, and that actually facilitates discussion with students about research, which is one of the reasons I like the activity, because otherwise, my students, at least I found, think research is you go to the library, you do a lit review, then you write a bunch of paragraphs, and then you write a conclusion, and then you turn your paper in and you're done. And you only do it one time. You don't go back and do any kind of reiteration. You might do one or two iterations, but it's kind of a linear process you follow. I jump through the hoops and I'm done. So this allows me to talk to them about how they might have to move back and forth and do multiple versions and reiterate as well.
Would this be a spot where you talk about revisions are not editing? Like, they are actual revisions in your project and revisions in your conclusions, and it's more like the grammatical spell checking kind of thing?
Yep, so I talk to them. A lot of them start to freak out after I start the research process, and they're like, is it okay if I change the topic? And I'm like, absolutely. Is it okay if I change the questions? Absolutely. And it's a good time. I talk to them both about the actual product. So please go spell check, please go back and take a review, rewrite, etc., but also about the process, that it's okay if you change directions partway through as you start to learn more about your topic. Other input? So how about any thoughts about how this might make me or you as an instructor to help make our thoughts and expectations visible to ourselves and to our students. So we've been looking at this from a student perspective, but how about from an instructor's perspective? How would this activity, do you see it impacting you as an instructor?
This is Steve. I like the idea of having tools. I know we're not allowed to use the words visual learner anymore based upon modern learning theory. That's okay. That's going to end up changing as well, because what's modern today, 2-3 years from now, will be antiquated. But I like the idea of having tools and checklists and these type of visual aids, because a lot of the students, you know, they're motivated, they want to do a good job, but they don't know how to get from point A to point C. So if we can give them a roadmap, that will just help them be able to ask the right questions, and they can provide the right information. So it's not from a lack of motivation sometimes that they struggle. It's just not understanding what are the process steps, because they're still learning.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I like the idea of being able to use it to design instruction and assessment. Because if it's important, you include activities that highlight each of the parts, but you also have ways to assess it, because if you don't, the students won't think it's important anyway.
Right.
So it would fit in my rubrics.
Excellent. Good. Good. Other thoughts?
I always think it's really important to remember that what we take for granted or what we assume as our base knowledge of information, and that's one of those things that, even though I think I'm generally pretty good at being able to break things down for students, there are pieces where I just get kind of taken aback and I'm like, oh, what do you mean you don't understand that? Like, you know, not asking that to them, but being reminded that there are those moments for everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
So this type of a process can really help make my process explicit to both myself, and then allow me to make that explicit to the students as well.
Good. So oops, go ahead, Steve.
I didn't say anything. I'm sorry.
Thought I interrupted somebody.
No, not me.
All right. So so for me, it's been helpful because I get to see those pregnant pauses in instruction. I also have used it to really look at how I'm introducing research. I'm stopping to have a conversation with them and tell them that research is messy. It's made me it's enabled me to approach my students with a bit more patience, and also help me look at these blind spots where I'm just assuming that people know a lot of the skills and some skills that go into doing what I'm asking them to do. It lets me understand not only how visible thinking is there for students, but how I can make my thinking visible and explain it better to students. So with that, Jesse, I think, has well, first of all, are there any more questions or comments about today's activity? So Jesse, I think, has some housekeeping tips and some thoughts on this module that's coming up and that's being posted. Jesse, we can't hear you, but can you share a screen and use a whiteboard, or can you call me on the phone, or in some way indicate what you want folks to do for next time? Can you put something in the chat? Or can you indicate that you're going to send something out in an email, or what would you like to do?
1 minute.
I'm not hearing from Jessie.
She sent it yesterday, she says.
Okay. All righty. Okay, so with that, if there are no more questions or comments, that will be it for this session. If you want to stay on for a few minutes and continue the dialogue, I'm happy to do that. Anything?
Sylvia, I know that I missed the first part of this, but I saw you talk about this activity, I think at the open meeting last spring. Would it be okay if I use this for my exploration class? We're getting into starting our research project, and this, like, just the idea of planning a hike and doing that would segue so perfectly. Can I use it and give you credit for it, please?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, it would just be perfect. I love it.
And so you actually bring up a point that I found to be really helpful. So when John Willison came and did a workshop, he introduced us to, he used a similar process, but he used an image from the Australian tax code. And it was interesting and it got the point across, but a lot of the elements were lost on us because we didn't understand the nuances of, for example, the Australian national symbol. They have like the emblem on their flag and stuff. So none of us were familiar enough with some of the images to find all of the faults, and that was fine. But one of the ideas I've found to be very helpful, I've done several workshops in other states, is to find something that connects with the audience. So, and hiking Wisconsin is perfect for anybody in Wisconsin because lots of folks do it. It's not so exciting for people who, might enjoy water or who are, in the middle of, we're on the edge of the beach in Florida, so you might want to pick a beach scene or pick some other context. So you're more than welcome to use this, but one of the things that I'll have everybody thinking about is how could they take some ideas or activities, and there's a number of different ways to approach introducing the framework, people, but how would you introduce it within your context and make it something that your students can relate to? So as you move around and as you use different classes, you might want to think about, practice with this one and then figure out ways you could expand it. So, and then let us know, sure.
Yeah, I'll do that. It's definitely, I would do a different thing in my physics classes than I would in the exploration and risk class. So.
And actually, Jessie and I would be really interested. We're really interested to see how math and science approach this, because we put the social sciences down, but we don't really, we're not from, I don't know that this would resonate with a math and science application, and we're struggling to see what that might look like.
Mm-hmm.
If you get something or create something, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of my goal here, is to figure out a way that we can incorporate this into our physics stuff, because we talk so much about information literacy for our students, and recognizing that it does look different within each field, but there's got to be a way to apply it constructively to what we're doing as well.
Yeah, so that will be an interesting dialogue to continue throughout the rest of the year. So it'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Dustin, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, so right before this started, I found out what courses I'm teaching over the next semester, and one of them is a lab course that I'm teaching now, but now I actually have time to prepare before the semester starts. It was a mess at the beginning of this semester, and this has given me a lot of ideas about how to get them. So the biggest obstacle for me has been getting them to the embark and clarify step, or the aspect of research, because the current labs don't support that at all. they hand you a lab manual and say, turn, push this button, turn this knob, write down what number the screen says. Yeah, and so like just thinking about it from all these different angles is helping me generate some ideas about how to encourage students to come up with their own questions. And a lot of it is just, I mean, they can't just come up with whatever question they have because we don't have the equipment to do that. But if they're familiar enough with the equipment and then have enough time to maybe dive into the literature, discuss with each other, then I've gotten some good ideas about how we can get there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It might mean restructuring the whole course, but that's okay.
So I don't know if this would work, but I used, I did a workshop up north, and their 7th graders had done, for teachers, and their 7th graders had just gotten done investigating and doing a research project on white-nosed bat syndrome. And so I took the idea and stretched it more than just a bit, but I turned it into a zombie apocalypse problem, and then had them. So there was this NASA researcher who went over to Africa and set up a mobile lab in Africa to look at the Ebola outbreak, and that experience led her to the space station. And I was doing something with digital fabrication labs. So I'm like, okay, we've got a zombie apocalypse, and we've got to set up our lab to do these science experiments, and then had them start workshop activities. And so one of the strategies I've found is that stories can be really motivating to younger students. I've watched them as I've told them stories, and they actually pay attention. They like them. So, if you could incorporate this idea of research skills into stories, I don't know if that would work for you, but give them a story and a reason to use their equipment that will contextualize a need for that. Like I said, it would take some thinking, but that's an idea that I continue to play with.
Okay.
Dustin, are you the one? I think I remember reading you're teaching physics labs.
Yes.
Okay. So I teach physics as well, and I'm lab manager. That's like we converted everything that we do to active learning. So we used to have a separate lecture and lab, and we had, like you're talking about, our lab manual was very formulaic.
Yeah.
And what we've had pretty good success doing is kind of restructuring the whole thing, where we start out with the very formulaic piece, but we talk to them about what's going on at each step.
Sure.
We're telling them, yes, set this up this way, measure this thing, but here's what we're trying to show you. And then with each subsequent activity, we take some of those directions away.
Yeah.
With the idea that they're building up that ability to say, oh, these are the questions that I should be asking as we go through this. Certain mixed results, I think. I mean, it's successful, but the students really don't like it when you get to that really inquiry-based piece, because it's messy, right? They much prefer having the workbook to fill in than they do over the other piece. But so I have lots of resources for that kind of stuff if you'd like to chat about that at some point.
Definitely, yeah. I like that almost an iterative approach where they're learning little by little. Because what I was scribbling down was kind of take a few days to kind of familiarize them with, this is how an oscilloscope works, this is how the spectrometer works, and all that, and then kind of throw them to the wolves and say, hey, now you have all these tools, make up your own labs about what you want to study. But I think you're right that there need to be some middle steps in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But one of the things you could also do is, this is where you tie the research component into it. Here's the tools. Go out and find an application where you would use this in real life. And they can come up then with some applications which you could turn around and use to construct or lead them through a research process. If you find the problems, Make sure your students are working harder than you are.
Right. Yeah.
I keep reminding myself of the mantra that those who do the work are doing the learning.
Yeah. So, well, I'm actually looking forward to this conversation because it's one I'm pretty interested in myself.
One of the pieces I think that we run into in physics, and Dustin, you sort of alluded to this, is the equipment issue, where we're not just introducing a new concept about how to think about information or information literacy, but we're also introducing all of these tools to them. You know, graphing programs. We have very intimidating equipment. Like they come in and it's scattered across their counter and they need to figure out how to put together this Tinker Toy kind of thing. And so we have to structure that into our skills building too, almost before we can get to that information embark and clarify piece, because otherwise they just get stonewalled at that physical barrier of there's this stuff and I don't know what to do with it. But that's surmountable, and so just that idea of getting them used to the equipment, having some very formulaic explore this equipment before we get into the more open-ended stuff is really important.
Yeah, could you send me maybe a couple examples, maybe early, middle, and late in the semester of what those types of, how you structure the experiments and how you make them, push them off the cliff to think on their own.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that. I think we can share files through the website. Is that right?
I believe you can. Yes.
Okay. I'll explore that and send you something.
Okay, thanks.
If not, shoot us an email and we'll try to fix it.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time this week, and we'll see you online in a couple weeks.
All right. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Hey, you too. Bye. Hang on. I'm gonna end the meeting, and then I actually am gonna walk down to see you because I got to meet some students there. Okay. I'm still gonna walk down there because I got to meet some students there. So anyway, I'll see you in a bit.